Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of Happy Mum, Happy Baby, the podcast. Today's guest is a writer and author. She writes the most beautiful poetry on motherhood. She's got several books. The latest is Beautiful Chaos. I cannot tell you how much I love these books. Buy one for yourself, buy one for a friend. You will not regret it. Honestly, it's like the biggest gift you can give yourself. She has 3 children, hence all the books on motherhood. It is Jessica Urlichs. Hello.
Hi. Thank you. Look, I heard so much that it's given me a big head. I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you. And thank you for your beautiful endorsement on the book. It means the world.
Absolutely. Honestly, your poetry is just so gorgeous. And it kind of fixes you in the present of motherhood and you know what you're experiencing now. But it's like this beautiful healer of everything that's come before, and it is the massive, you know, we are in this together, but in a really beautiful, poetic way that just gives everything understanding.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing about poetry as well, which is why I started writing, is just this way to organise my thoughts. And I think, you know, becoming a mother, there are so many thoughts. Like, even though you'll run off your feet, you sort of also feel like you have this time to just sit and like ruminate on everything, which is what was happening to me. And I'm like, okay, I've got to get this down. I've got to write about this.
And you've been writing poetry since you were tiny, right?
Yeah, I started writing in primary school. And I remember one of my primary teachers actually read out one of my poems at her wedding. And it was just something that I just really loved to do. And I've always done it. And I sort of stopped for a little bit, sort of around those teen years. Yeah. I guess I just found other things to do, and sitting and writing poetry, I guess, wasn't really that cool at the time. But it's always been there. It's always been something I've loved. And it wasn't until after my second that I got back into it again.
It's amazing, isn't it? That's just that, it does seem that beautiful way of kind of getting what you can't really put into words a lot of the time out, like actually finding the words to express it and organising it in a way that it does fix you in where you are, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. And I'm so glad as well when I think about, when I look back and I read some of the pieces that I wrote, I think, gosh, I couldn't actually write that now, because I was so in it. I was so in that moment, and it was raw and it was tender and I was really vulnerable. And I'm so glad that I wrote when I could, because it really does take me back. And it also, like, I look at it now and I think, wow, I've come so far from that place, because not all of it is sunshine and rainbows. You know, some of it is really hard, and we can feel quite alone in motherhood. And I look at it now and I think, wow, you know, when you're in that tunnel, sometimes you just think there is no light. But then when you look back, you're like, no, it really is temporary. It really is temporary.
And you can't write that sort of stuff on reflection. It has to be in the moment when you're actually feeling it.
I think so. And there are times that I have written pieces on reflection, but when I read the pieces that I wrote when I was in it, or it was like 2 a.m. and I'd been, you know, up and down all night, and I was sat in the breastfeeding chair and I was just, you know, writing little scribbles down in my phone notepad, those are actually the poems, the ones that I probably jotted down in, say, like half an hour. They're probably the ones that I think resonate the most with others.
Yeah, absolutely. How old are your children? You have 3.
Yes, I do. So they're 6, 5 and 18 months.
No.
And we were only going to have 2. That was what we sort of set out to do. So we had 2 a year apart, because we thought, let's just have them close together, you know, kind of like rip it off like a Band-Aid. We'll get all of the phases in at once. And it really doesn't work like that. But no one could tell me that. And it was intense. It's great now though. But anyway, it was probably when Holly was about, I'm going to say like 2.5, that I started to think, actually maybe there's another one in us. So now we have 3.
Amazing. Let's go back to your childhood to start with, because you live in Christchurch now, don't you?
Yes.
Over in New Zealand. Is that where you grew up?
Yes, it is. Yep.
And what was your childhood like?
Oh, my childhood. It was a pretty simple childhood, I guess you could say. I don't remember, you know, we never had all the flashy things, but we had a pretty close family. My mum, and actually my dad really like cultivated that writing side of me. So they were always buying me the poetry, the little wee notepads, and they were always listening to my poems. And I remember that just being such a theme throughout my childhood as my writing.
Did you ever look ahead to the future and see yourself being a mum?
Not so much a mum. And this is the funny thing, is that I remember saying when I was really little that I wanted to be a poet. Right. Not really knowing like what that entailed. And I guess in my head I thought like you had to be a certain type of way to be a poet. Like I didn't think you could just be someone who wrote something that was truthful. I just thought, like, I don't really know what I thought, but I knew that I wanted to do something in that space. And it was kind of like oh yeah, everyone would just be like, oh, okay. I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I didn't actually know that I wanted to be a mum. And it wasn't until I met my husband now that I was like, actually, I can see myself being a mum, and I can see myself having children with you. Like, I want a family with you. The opportunity just didn't present itself, I guess. And I was always the one who, this is going to sound so weird because like I write about motherhood and that's like my biggest passion, but if someone passed me a baby, I'd be like, oh, you can have your baby back now. But if someone brought a puppy over, I'd be like, oh my God.
I think that there are a lot of women like that, a lot of people like that just kind of, I think it just seems like a very far off concept that maybe it's not even, I don't know, it's not even something that you factor in until you are faced with it or meet someone that you're like, actually, let's do this. I
just wasn't actually sure that I had that like real maternal side of me. Although, like I always loved animals and, like looked after my younger brothers. And so, I did love kids, but it wasn't something like I had friends that would say, all I want to be is a mum, or my dream is just to be a mum, which is fine. And that is great. Like being a mum is one of my best achievements, but I wanted other things. And that was more, that meant more to me at the time. Yeah. And, it still does. Like it actually still does. I need things for me to be a better mum. Yeah, I need to do things for me.
I wonder if with things like maternal instinct and a mother's instinct, I wonder if there's sort of a pressure that comes with that for women as well. We're meant to feel a certain way or to want a certain thing. And actually, if that's not there, it can sometimes feel a bit jarring that that's not. Like, why don't we feel that if other people are so desperate to be mothers?
Yeah, I think there's definitely societal pressures there. I do feel like that's shifting a little bit. I know that there are more people now talking about their choices to be child-free, which shouldn't even be something they need to talk about. But I think because of those societal pressures, we're starting to, like, I guess, shift the conversations and those, like, questions that we've just automatically asked that shouldn't be asked. Like, oh, so you're going to have children now? I mean, we don't know people's struggles. We also don't know if it's even something that's on the cards. It doesn't have to be. So I kind of feel like, it's been something for so long, but I am seeing a gradual shift, and I think that's good. Yeah.
Can you remember falling pregnant with Harry?
Yes, it was like 2 months after our wedding, and we just weren't sure. We thought, you hear about journeys where it can take a really long time and it can be really difficult for some people. We were quite fortunate that we didn't have to face any of those struggles, and we got pregnant quite quickly, and I had a really easy pregnancy as well. I feel like we had a really kind of unicorn journey. Everything was really good in that aspect. Come the birth, come postpartum, it was a different story. We definitely had a rocky beginning. The birth was quite traumatic for me. And when he was born, I mean, I think, a lot of women, as empowering as it can be and as beautiful as birth is, it can also be a really traumatic thing that we go through, and just like the way our mind just comes to terms with what just happened, and I had...
You were turned away from the hospital, weren't you, in labour?
I was pretty much told that I wasn't in labour, and because I had never experienced labour before, it was my first baby, I didn't know really what I should be feeling, and B, I didn't want to be a hindrance to anyone, which is so crazy because you're about to give birth, like you're about to embark on like the biggest thing like in your life, and you don't want to be a hindrance. And that could just be me. I mean, my voice got louder as the births went on, but with him, I got turned away, and I was having a really tough time. He was posterior as well. I was having a tough time at home. And then when we came back, they actually did try and turn me away again. And it wasn't until I started vomiting that they did an examination on me, and they realised...
They hadn't examined you until this point?
I think they did examine me the first time, but it's all a blur. I'm sure I was examined the first time, but I wasn't examined when I came back in. And then when I was 9 centimetres. But they, I was going to go home before they'd actually checked me until I vomited on the way out. And they thought, we should probably check her. And I had this sense of relief, because I thought, oh, thank goodness, like that means I'm close. Because I was thinking, if I have to go home and do that again for another few hours, I don't know if I can cope. And then, we sort of went on to, he was a healthy baby, and I was just so, so happy about that. I was so relieved, and, I had all of those feelings, and it was like, for me, it was an instant bond, but I definitely had that trauma, I guess, attached to that. It was very hard for me to reconcile everything that had just happened. And then breastfeeding became really tough for us, and I feel like that kind of set the postnatal anxiety in motion that we kind of carried forward for a while.
How did that present itself?
It sort of started for me with, at first I just thought, oh, this is baby blues. Like, we've talked about baby blues. A lot of women experience that with the crash of hormones. But it was because it lasted for so long, even after I made the choice to stop trying to breastfeed, just because of just how hard it was. And the fact that I would literally, and this is going to sound awful, but, I've talked about this a bit now, but my toes would be curling even as he woke up from his nap. That cry, I thought, oh God, I have to feed him. And it was just becoming really unenjoyable. I wanted to enjoy my baby. I really did. And I just remember, I can't remember if it was mum or my midwife, someone said to me, you got to draw a line in the sand here. You've got to put yourself first. Happy mum, happy baby, right? Yeah. And so I did. And things were a lot better. I felt like I got to kind of like shift back into myself, into this new role of being a mother, the mother that I needed to be for him, and the mother that I wanted to be for him. But I still got those intrusive thoughts, and I think it was like the thoughts of just constantly wanting to keep him safe and feeling like there were just risks everywhere, but they were very graphic. And I didn't want to talk about that because I thought, oh God, there's something very wrong with me. Turns out it's actually very common. And it was only when I opened up about that I realised that it was actually something that a lot of people go through, and it can attach itself to traumatic events or just fatigue, which of course, as mums, we are very tired.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And did you know, what gave you the courage to start talking to people about those intrusive thoughts?
Initially, it was just something that I blurted out with my husband, because I just didn't feel like me. It was quite a random time where I remember sitting at the table. It was in the middle of the day, and I just blurted it out, and I said, I don't feel good. I think I need to talk to somebody. And so we kind of set down that path. But that was I think that was probably the hardest part, was just saying it, voicing it. After that, everything became a lot easier. And social media actually really helped me, because if you follow the right people, you've got to look at social media like a village as well. They give you the right energy that you need, and if you're not getting that, then you need to change that. But I found those people that openly spoke about their postnatal anxiety that they were experiencing, and just just the raw truths of what they were going through, the highs and the lows, and all of it in between. And I was like, oh. And when I started to share my writing, which this sounds so weird, but it was so much easier to share it with strangers than it was with people I knew that were close to me. They came way later.
Really?
Yeah, my friends, not my really, really, really close friends, but I wouldn't put up a piece of my writing on my Facebook page.
Yeah.
Because that fear of that judgment was so much scarier than setting up just a random page and just putting it out there. Because I guess in my head I thought, well, the people that are going to find this are going to be the people that need it, and they're going to be exactly where I'm at. And we just made these really like authentic, genuine connections. And it was such a pivotal part of my motherhood journey is starting that page.
Yeah. Yeah. And just getting those words out and being able to realise that you're not alone by letting other people know that they're not alone. It's kind of that bounce back, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Also,
so
going back
validating.
to the breastfeeding, I think if you have experienced that pain that comes with it, I know you said it's going to sound awful about the toes curling. Like, if you've experienced it, you will totally understand that, you know, that kind of like, that kind of feeling of, oh gosh, I've got to go through that now. And I think there's so much language out there about how it's this beautiful, intimate moment and this beautiful thing. But actually, for a lot of people, when it's not working, it is excruciating pain. And then we've got that double guilt of, no, but I must carry on, whether that's from society or something that we have in our own heads that we can't kind of stop. You know, it is, there's so much built in around that. It's really hard.
Oh, it is. And I mean, you know, for me, it was like the shards of glass, kind of almost like a psychological pain. I mean, when I went on to have Holly, my second, I was more afraid of breastfeeding and trying that again than I was the birth. I was way more terrified of breastfeeding because that's how much that kind of messed me up. And I really, you know, I went through countless lactation consultants, and I was going back and forth. I mean, I spent my 30th birthday in an office for the longest time trying to get that latch right, and it was just, sorry to everyone listening, but it was a bloodbath. It was awful. And I was like, I can't do this. This is just not working for us. And look, I don't know if this is directly related. I went on to be able to feed my girls. It wasn't without its struggles. And yeah, it wasn't a walk in the park. There was pain there to begin with, but it was manageable, and I felt like I could manage it. Down the track, you know, Harry, he's got sensory processing and dyspraxia, and I kind of think, oh, you know, I do wonder if that's related. It could have been anything, but no lactation consultant could work out what it was. And, you know, I just think sometimes it just, you know, it's not meant to be your journey, and you have to make peace with that. You're still an amazing mum. You know, you still love your baby. Absolutely. You'd still do anything for them. But how you feed them is just such a small part of this parenting journey.
Let's talk about the 4 months after Harry was born, because that's when I know that you said you wanted them close together, but you fell pregnant at when Harry was 4 months old.
I know, it's mad, isn't it?
I know that people came up to me when Buzz was really young, was like, if you go now, you know, that's great, get all the baby stuff done in one go, and then you can just chill out. All the baby gates go, everything goes. Come on, Jess.
I mean, you know,
tell us the truth of this situation.
It kind of like, it makes sense in your head when you think about it like that, but then what you don't think about is the fact that you are up all night. I mean, unless you have amazing sleepers, which we did not, we were yo-yoing between rooms because one, you know, and at the time our house, it was really little, and, you know, all of our rooms were right next to each other. I mean, it would still, I think no matter what, you've got a baby screaming and they're going to wake up, no matter if you've got wings in your house, you know, you wake up to that noise. And so we were just yo-yoing, and I would be petrified of nighttime. Like, as soon as it was like kind of like into that bedtime routine, which, you know, now with our children older, we're like, you know we've got some time, you know, you get to that point. But for a long time, because they were a year apart, it was just constant, like we did not sleep. So that was really hard. I think as well, like the phases are so close together that when one is starting solids, then the other one's like, you know, crawling, or when one's learning to crawl, the other one's walking. So my kids walked a little bit later. So when I had Holly, Harry was, just over a year old, and that's when he was starting to walk, and that was crazy. That was a crazy time. So I think as well, like as soon as you kind of get used to one thing, then you got to forget it all and learn the next thing. And when you've got two of that happening, so close together, it's quite challenging.
How has it been having Heidi the other two are still super young, but having Heidi as kind of the baby of the family, whereas the other two would have been the babies.
Yeah. Oh, it's the best. She's the family baby. It's just so great. You know, we were really nervous about changing the dynamic because things were so good, and because they're so close together in age, it's just like we're having a lot of fun with that now. I mean, you know, they fight a lot, as siblings do, but they're also best mates, and so we thought, oh, you know, is this gonna change things? But it's honestly been so great, and they dote on her. They are very loving, so it's been a really nice dynamic shift, I guess.
Yeah. How did Holly and Heidi's births compare to Harry's?
Well, their births were actually okay. So I had an epidural with Holly after I think I'd been in labour for quite a long time. I opted for the epidural because I still had a lot of that trauma in my head with the birth of Harry, and she was quite a big baby. So that was great. With Heidi, I went down the same path again, but I was pushing her for an hour and she didn't budge. So I got sent to theatre because they were going to have to do an emergency C-section, which was quite petrifying for me, the thought of surgery. Like, I hadn't had any time to think about it, so I was kind of like, oh gosh, this wasn't part of the plan. But, you know, we all know that things don't always go to plan. I didn't, I guess, envision that happening.
And also, if you've had two births that haven't led to a C-section, you probably don't even think that's going to be the way that's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it didn't look like that was going to happen either. My midwife was pretty certain that everything was fine. Her heart rate was fine, but she'd gotten her chin stuck in my pelvis somehow and she just wasn't coming out. And again, she was another big bub. So yeah, anyway, they got me down there, and again, it was a bit of a blur. I just, you know, remember like looking at Drew and his scrubs thinking, ooh, you look pretty good. But I was also quite out of it as well at that point. But the crazy thing is that, like, I had the most amazing obstetrician. So I remember her smacking a consultant's hand out of the way. He came at me with the, what do you call them? He was going to give me an episiotomy, the forceps, but he was going to cut me, because generally if you're going to have them, you do. And she said, no, we're going to try them without them, and we're going to let her push. And anyway, I did. She saved me from having to go through that. So I did have the forceps, but I didn't need an episiotomy. And I was able to push her out with a little bit of guided assistance, and it was fine. It actually, like, despite that last minute kind of like, oh my God, what's happening, the birth was actually fine, and she was great. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
And now it's like, you know, I love the fact that you've called her the family baby.
Yeah. I actually
really
heard that term, and it's like someone used that for the third baby, and it's just so true. Like, she is. It's been such a blessing.
Yeah, I can remember bringing our third home, and the other two just wouldn't leave him alone. He was always in someone's arms.
Yeah, it's so nice.
My sister-in-law's just had a little baby, and whenever we see her, ours always say, "Can we have another one?" We're like, no, we have our three. You enjoy hugging Mabel, then we can go home and sleep.
My son said something so funny to me the other night. We were, I still lie with him to get him to bed because we have the best little conversations, and he's 6. And he goes, so we were talking about periods, and I tried to explain it the best that I could. I have no idea how it came up, but it came up, and I was like, well, I'm going to tell him about it. And I explained about the egg getting released and passing through, and that's, the blood and everything. And he was like, so all of those eggs are babies that you're not having. So, and then he got really upset, and he said, can't you just have all the babies? And I was like, you're very sweet, mate, but no. And I said, wait till he finds out about what goes on with men. God. Yikes, how to have that conversation. Yeah.
Let's talk about Harry, actually, because you've described him in your poetry over the years and in different interviews and stuff. And it feels like you've been on quite the journey to understand Harry. And I have one of my kids is kind of very similar, and it's taken a while for us to completely understand, all of his beautiful ways, let's say. But you also wrote an amazing poem called Wild Child, which is just so beautiful. And for any mother or father who has a child that's a little bit more spirited, shall we say, and less, I always use the word compliant, because, it's that thing of, I think society wants our children to be compliant, but in doing so, you take away all of their quirks and their joys and the things that make them children. So I feel like you've been on quite a journey to get where you are with Harry.
Yeah, no, I definitely have. At 4 months old, I sort of knew, around about the time I got pregnant, actually, I knew that he wasn't like other babies. We would go to like mothers groups, and like just little sounds would set him off. If there was a balloon that popped or another baby was crying, we couldn't walk past police sirens, even sad songs. He has always had that really like sort of deep feeling nature to him, and yeah, I caught that quite early on. And then I learned about the term highly sensitive, and I sort of took that with me and sort of ran with that, and I believe that is him to a T. He is highly sensitive. He is a deep empath, and he has this like really acute kind of understanding of like other people, and he can read moods. He's fascinating. And then, but what comes with that are some really big challenges as well. He can be quite black and white in his way of thinking in social situations. Not really so much anymore. This journey has been, it hasn't been linear, but we have made a lot of progress to make not only him sort of understand, I guess, social norms, but people also understand him in the way that he is. Because one thing I just never wanted to do is I never wanted, his heart to be hardened. And I feel like that's kind of the way the world is. They don't know how to deal with these deep feeling souls, and they try to harden that heart. And so like I always said to myself, I don't want to let that happen. I want to protect that for him, and I want him to know that this is a superpower that he has. But it is quite a burden, I think, as well, especially as a young child, to carry that kind of like weight of other people's feelings and worry. Yeah.
Especially when it comes to things like emotional regulation and things like that. Did you or do you find yourself preempting certain situations? Because sometimes, especially when you've got multiple children and something happens and you need to change the path of the day, and you might know that that's going to kick up an outburst, and I've heard you say about Harry, and it's very similar here, that it can go from 0 to 100 very, very quickly. And it's kind of managing that, and also when you're in public, kind of blocking out the noise that comes with it, and just channeling your child and what they need in that moment. It's how those triggers kind of come up for you, really, as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was really tough because they were so close in age. So I was dealing with a baby and a toddler, or two toddlers, because I would try and take them out and get them out and about and do these things that I never really felt comfortable doing, because there would be things like other kids' birthday parties. Even a chorus of happy birthday would be enough to absolutely kind of like shut him down and be like, oh, and he just wouldn't know how to react, and he would just burst out into tears. And I could almost see I knew what the signs were, but I also would say to him, they're going to sing happy birthday now. I would give him those cues, but he would want to stay. And so then we'd have this sort of meltdown unfold, and I would see the tidal wave coming, but it always came so quickly. It's that's that 0 to 100. You can anticipate it, but it hits you before you have any time to do anything, and sometimes you just can't diffuse things like that. You just have to sit in, the uncomfortableness of it, and just go, right, well, I'm going to have to just let this pass and let them know that I'm here when they're ready. But that's really hard to do in public. And there were a lot of situations like that for me. And there was one, I'll never forget it. I took them to this Air Force museum anyway. And he woke up from a nap and he wasn't in good spirits, but it had taken us a long time to get there. So I was like, nope, we're doing it. We're going in. And he was just, I don't know, it was a really windy day, and we got out of the car and the wind was really loud, and that was enough. That was enough to just set the whole thing in motion. And I stupidly didn't bring the pram, so, I'm holding him in one arm and I've got Holly in the other arm, and I get in there and he just sprawls out on the ground and he is just beside himself. I mean, it's almost like watching a night terror, but in real time, like during the day. And there was nothing I could do, nothing I could say. And I was horrified because this is a museum. It was very quiet. And I didn't know what to do because I couldn't pick him up. I couldn't get Holly. And I just had this one person come over to me. I think she worked in the cafe, and she just said, can I do anything? Can I help? And I was like, actually, there's not much you can do. She's like, I can take your baby for you. And I was like, oh, no, it's okay. Because I knew she wouldn't want to go to someone.
Yeah.
And she said, well, can I just stand here with you? And I was like, yeah, that would be really nice. And I'll never forget her. And I wrote to them after that and I said, there was an angel who came up to me from the cafe, and please tell her a huge thank you from me. But just that solidarity in that moment where there was nothing that anyone could do but just be in the storm. But she was in that storm with me, and she didn't need to be. But yeah, I'll never forget it.
That is such a beautiful thing. That literally just instantly brought tears to my eyes. That's so gorgeous. Because I think as bystanders and as parents, all we want to do is fix a situation. And she actually did for you what you do for Harry, which is literally just be there. Be there within that, whatever is going on in their world at that moment, because it will pass. And sometimes, especially with emotional regulation and stuff, a different part of the brain is engaged, and you cannot reason when that part of the brain is firing.
No, there's no point even trying. Yeah, no. Exactly. And I look at him now and I'm so proud of him. I mean, we still have some pretty tough moments, but oh my goodness, like when you think that it's just going to always be this way or it's so hard, it's like, just have faith. Like, these kids are just so brilliant and amazing, and you're meant to be their parent. You're their mum for a reason. And like now I look at him and I think, like we have been on a journey. We've had occupational therapists and we've had some amazing teachers as well, and we've really all worked together. But if you hold that space and you also hold out that hope that it's a tough time and it isn't linear, but they'll get there.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're going to change. You don't want them to change.
No.
But they will just come into themselves and work out their place and how it all works.
I imagine give them the confidence to be themselves as well.
That's it, yeah. And that's the most, what do they say? Like, it's the bravest thing that you can be is yourself.
Yeah. How have you managed the things that trigger you? Because in those situations, we know that we have to just be there and hold that space for them. But as a child, we would have all heard, I mean, I don't know if you're like me, but I was very much like do as I told and all that stuff. And so when, one of your children are acting in a different way, it can often fire things off within you that you really have to fight against.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, I think it was just a different time when we were growing up. I sort of know that if you were acting out or even you just had really big feelings, like for me, I was sent to my room. You go deal with all those big feelings in your room because this is too much for us to deal with. So you go deal with that alone. And that's something I really try not to do because I know that was done to me. And I think we kind of had like this sort of upbringing of bottling things up. I don't think it was intentional. I don't think it was something that they realized that they were doing. It's just sort of been like perpetuated, I guess, through generations. And it's funny because I wrote The Rainbow on My Heart, my children's book for Harry when he was 2, to help him just like put a name to his feelings and associate it with colours, because I thought, that will really help him. And I was around at my nana's house and her friend saw the book and she goes, oh, is that another fairy feelings book? And I was like,
didn't realise it was yours.
Yeah, it is another fairy feelings book. It's like, oh my goodness. But it's just that kind of, It's like, oh, feelings. Nobody has those, do they? I just think it's like one of those things that is maybe not everybody from that generation. I'm not saying everybody, but it's just we see it so differently now. We see how important it is for mental health struggles to talk about how you're feeling early on. And that's just what I want the kids to know, is that they can always come to us with however they're feeling, and we will listen to them.
Jess, has motherhood changed you?
Oh, it has completely. I feel like I'm still me. Like there's still aspects about me that haven't changed. Like I still love a lot of the same things, but I feel like I've stepped into a new and much better version of myself. Like I'm a lot softer at the edges now. I'm a lot more selfless, but obviously you have to be, but you want to be.
Yeah.
There's so much, and I feel like I've grown a lot as a person. There's been, like I always say, I feel like so many mirrors are held up to me throughout this journey. And yeah, some are triggering, but some are so needed. And it's been like quite a, I don't know how to, like it. Yeah, it's been challenging, but it has been the growth that I needed. And I just cannot imagine being anybody else. Like I feel like I know this person the most, who I am now.
Absolutely. If you could write a letter on motherhood, who would it be to, and what would you say?
Well, I feel like every time I write something, it's usually to myself. It's almost like a journal entry, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it would always be from my own experience, maybe to past me, just telling me that there are cracks of light through the tunnel the whole way. Even if you can't see it, you will see it later. And just to trust the journey and to trust in yourself.
Yeah. I like, now that my sister-in-law has just had a baby, it takes you back to those early days where it just feels never ending. And I can absolutely remember thinking, God, this is life now, and there's just this, and it's beautiful because there's life, and that's an amazing thing. But oh my gosh, this is all consuming, and I'm not sleeping, and it can feel like, this is the new way. And actually, it's like you say, light does come through, and you will, it'll all pass eventually.
Yeah, it's completely transformational. And I think as well, like, I mean, I don't know, no one really talks about, I didn't find that really anybody talked about some of the harder moments. I mean, you don't want to go into motherhood hearing just the hard moments. Like, no one wants to hear that. So, but there wasn't really a balance. It was just like, oh, congratulations. And then the baby comes, oh, congratulations. I was like, why am I feeling like this? Why is breastfeeding so hard? Why, it just felt like, oh, maybe if more people talked about some of the harder times as well, I wouldn't have felt so alone. I just feel like that would have reframed a few things for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think, especially with the podcast, it's that thing of whenever we see other people talking about it on TV, like say, especially as a new mum, that's probably that's one big place where you're like watching people. If they talk about motherhood, it's always, oh, it's amazing, because it's really quick, because people are there to promote something else. They don't want to talk about their private life. It's amazing. That's the only thing that you're going to get. Also, because you know that if they are there to talk about it, it's a very nuanced subject, and they only get a 5-minute slot, so they don't want to be seen to be, not loving it, or ungrateful for being able to have children or anything else. So they keep it very clipped, very short, and they don't go into those nuances. Whereas something like poetry, something like a podcast where it's long form and you get to fill in those blanks, that's when those conversations really happen. And I don't know about you, actually, in terms of real life, in the present, in the moment stuff, I can remember going to baby groups, and I had tried, for some reason, I tried taking on 4 new baby groups in 1 week, and it was so overwhelming. I think Tom had come back and talked to me about neuro pathways, and how, at this age it's so important because everything kind of fires off a different pathway and blah blah blah. And I was like, oh my God, I need to fill his time with stuff. 10 weeks. And I can remember going to a few of the classes and just being really overwhelmed and feeling like I have to be a certain way, like I was breastfeeding in the car because I didn't want to do it in there. I didn't want to get a dummy out when I needed it, and all these things. And I can remember going and sitting next to one mum at like a baby sign group, and just having that one person go, I haven't slept, and just instantly going, we're not going to pretend it's all perfect and that everything is going swimmingly. I like you. I found my person, and I always think that those friendships that you make in those early days, they're not there to add another pressure. They're not there to have another demand. Sometimes being able to slip into someone's WhatsApp at 3:00 in the morning, knowing that they are also up, that for me is that's the friendship of not convenience. That's the friendship that you need in that moment. So it's an amazing thing to get out and to meet those people that speak the same language.
Yeah, I honestly could not agree more. Like that is it. And when I had my antenatal group, it was actually a very short poem that I wrote in one of my books called Welcome to Motherhood, and it was about how you sort of walk into that group, and I just remember this, like it is in my mind. Everyone was sitting in a semicircle, stripy tops. I sat there, and everyone was just, we had all just had our babies, and we'd all kind of got to know each other, but we were us, but different. And we were all kind of like nervous and kind of like, and I'm pulling out my formula and other people are trying to figure out the latch, and everyone's just, nervous smiles, exchanging pleasantries. And it wasn't until someone actually said to me, actually it was me who said it, but they said back, yes, this is really hard. And I just felt like this instant connection, like, I could just breathe and be like, cool, we can actually be honest with each other. It's just that honesty is just, it's underrated.
Absolutely. And as soon as you say, gosh, it's hard, or I'm struggling, it suddenly becomes so much easier.
Well, it does, because I think, vulnerability breeds vulnerability, and you kind of like give somebody else that permission to be vulnerable back. And there is such a power in that. And just not feeling like, it's just me. There's something wrong with me. You're like, no, everyone else experiences this, because actually it's not easy. It is hard. It's okay to be hard. It's supposed to be hard. You're raising a child. It's not going to be easy.
No. Jess, if you could complete these 3 sentences for me, that would be amazing. The first one is being a mum means.
Being a mum means, I'm going to paraphrase something that I've heard, but I really love it. Being a mum means not only dying for your child, but living for them.
Oh, I love that. Since having children,
Since having children, I have grown in the most beautiful ways.
And then finally, I'm happy when.
I'm happy when my kids wake up in the morning, and I'm happy when they go to sleep at night.
I love that. Jess, thank you so much. I know that you've stayed up late to be able to chat, and that's and it's
thank
amazing.
you.
Honestly, you know that I absolutely adore your work. Beautiful Chaos is absolutely sublime, and just honestly, like I said at the start, anyone listening, buy one for yourself, buy one for a mate, because it's just it's just a beautiful thing for your heart, and you can tell that it's directly from yours, Jess, so it's beautiful.
You're amazing. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for having me.